All right, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, my brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, citizens of YouTube, Pastor Dowell home. All right, it's requested. Y'all know me, if it's something requested, like more than 5, 6, 7 times, I'll go ahead and start talking about it because it needs to be talked about. I'm gonna try my best to give y'all the understanding, and I'm gonna try my best to give y'all the history of the particular subject of marriage. You know, when we grow up in American society and we all go to the public food system or their school system, right? And we learn the way that they want us to function in their world. I want you to listen. Unless you are a billionaire and you have great influence on policy, laws, influence, the truth is we're all subjects. You have the aristocrats, you have the oligarchies, the monarchies, and then you have the rest of us that are workers and peasants. So they seem to actually communicate. And of course, it's the same thing in today's society as it was in old. A lot of times when we are in a modern setting, we assume that we have luxuries and freedoms and liberties afforded to us. But I beg to differ. I'm going to tell you right now, the only luxury and freedom that you have civilly afforded to you is what you can declare and what you comprehend and understand yourself. So let's look at this for a second. They have reared us in this American society, and of course every other country pretty much the same way. All right, may have some variances here or there, may have some differences here or there, but they have a way that they want society to function. If I go back 2,000 years ago and you read into history books, now some people read only the history. I personally read the history plus biblical history. I try to get a well-rounded view and a perspective and point of view of the thought pattern and the way people thought back then, because you're not gonna, a lot of stuff that I talk to you about, you're not gonna learn in the educational system in the United States of America. It's like earlier today on Facebook. You know, my parents, my mother and father, after they had pulled themselves up by the bootstraps, we ended up moving out of the ghettos. And we moved out into, they call it the suburbs. That sounds fancy, but on the outskirts of the city. And they end up buying their own house. But this took time for them to do it. And of course, by that time, we were teenagers, and it was time for me to go on, and I went in the Army, all right? But what I'm saying is that after I moved out of the inner city to where I went to school, where I was fortunate to see 1 or 2 white children in the school. By the time I moved out of the inner city, I ended up being a minority. I remember in junior high school, that couldn't have been no more than 25, no more than 30 black students or minority students or melanated students in the whole school. There was no Mexicans, no other ethnic group, just black, white. And then by the time I got to high school, there was only at least probably no more than 20 of us, 20 melanated or black people in the high schools. Still had some of the greatest times in my life with the people that I went to high school with. But I never learned anything about slavery in this country. I didn't find that out until Roots came out. And then, of course, that intrigued me to start studying it, because it wasn't beneficial when you go to a white school for them to teach that type of curriculum to you. As a matter of fact, there's some college professors that actually been fired up here. When my daughter was going to Western Kentucky University, she knew of a professor that got fired because she went off script and started teaching the truth about slavery, and they fired her. So there's a lot of information that I'm using this for an example. There's a lot of information that the powers that be want to keep from you, because knowledge is power. Information is power. I said all that to paint a picture so we can go forward in this. Marriage. Did you know over 2,000 years ago that nobody got a marriage license by any societal government whatsoever at all? Nobody did. Nobody got a marriage license. It was pretty much on the system of her father or his father went to your father. They made an agreement. If she was a virgin, there was a bride price given. And I don't care if you was in a biblical society or not, this is what transpired and take place because it was a contract, it was an agreement. And in exchange for that, the bride price was kind of like insurance policy and escrow for the parents and them to keep, given that the tokens of her virginity was good. Now, I'm not going to go into theology explaining all this, but what I'm getting to is this. There was no civil government oversight in marriage. So let's fast forward a little bit less than 2,000 years. Let's fast forward about 1,900 years, okay? It wasn't until slavery allegedly, so-called, ended in the United States of America, that, and y'all have heard me say this once, I've been saying it for 20-something years, I'm just going to say it again, but they came up with the idea of the marriage license. And the only reason why they came up with the idea of the marriage license is because you had the white woman was interested in Mandingo. She was interested in the black man. And the black man was interested in the white woman. And of course, then they had, go look it up, go check it out. They had these things called miscegenation laws. They were doing everything they could possible to prevent a melanated black man and a white woman from marrying each other. So what they did was they came up with a licensing authority. Well, the government saw that they could actually make a lot of money on licensing. So they made it systemic all the way across the board. But there was something else that they put a hook in the jaw of everybody with too, that they did not disclose the terms or the conditions of their contract with you. Matter of fact, they created another entity outside of the actual civil court or the three parts of the government. They created the family court. And they used that family court to destroy the family in itself. And the family ended up being destroyed by not only the family court, but by women choosing to exercise divorce rights. Now watch this, let's go a little bit further. George Washington never had a marriage license. Go check it out. So what happened is that, and I often ask this question to people, you look at the quality of women today, the feminist movement and everything else is going on, and you look at the quality of women today and you look at this 70 to 80% divorce rate, which that's pretty much always initiated by the woman. Go look at the CDC. Go check out all these statistics and see if what I'm saying is so. So we got anywhere between, I said 70, 80, 60 to 70% divorce rate in this country. That means if you get married in this country, that means you stand a 60 to 70% chance of that marriage failing and getting a divorce. Now, why is that? And I'm gonna go back to what I said. Are women today a better quality of a woman than what our grandmothers were? And the answer is a positively no. Why? Because then when our grandmothers and them, they were interested in family. They knew their job description. They knew what the contract consisted of. They knew the purpose and the reason why they were created. They were wives and they were mothers, and they performed their roles in excellence. Today, women are knockoffs, jump-offs, thoughts. They celebrate being whores. They celebrate what they call that, what's that last thing? My whole phase. They actually celebrate them having a body count more than 50 men. Can you believe that? And see, it was something in the day for Papa to be a Rolling Stone. But you know what? Grandmother and granddaddy, they stayed married 40, 50, and 60 years and died that way. You fast forward this to this society. What has happened? First thing this society did was get mother out of the home and said that she's just as good as any man and exalted education above family. And now people are having the regrets by putting their best years on the back burner where they could actually be bearing children, chasing their careers. And then the majority of the women today, you look at it, I fly all the time. We see all these old stewardesses, single, unmarried. And I guarantee you that the majority I look at people's hands because that's what they wear in society is rings. We don't wear rings, but they wear rings. And you look around and see a bunch of single older women, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And guess what they're going to do? Die along with their cat, because they have given up their best years to chase after career, chase after education, and not family. And now when they get into their 40s, they can't have babies. 50s, you can almost count it out for sure. 60s, you can all but forget about it. So this world and this society has chosen the worst form of family that there ever could be. So marriage, if you use the state and you go get the same marriage license, and I might add the same marriage license that the homosexuals can go. They can go get the same marriage license that many of you monogamous people can get. They can get the same marriage license that lesbians get. But see, wisdom would teach you that if you're going to be married, why not just have your own agreement and contract and do it outside of the tentacles of the government? And you know the reason why I say that? Because if you are married by the government, you cannot dissolve that contract or that relationship, because you enter into a third-party contractual agreement out of which the state is the ward, not only of mastery over your marriage, but of the seed that comes from it. Because when you get that marriage license, you agree to put your children, by way of the birth certificate, under the authority and under the lordship of the state. That's why if you go to your wife and say, hey, I want a divorce, all right, you can't get a divorce just by going to her and saying it, because you didn't make a private contract like the Constitution says. You went to the state and you got set up with them. And so when a woman goes to the state, she knows full well today, getting a marriage license from the state, that the state is going to intervene and they're going to help her destroy the family unit, out of which now we see the reason why a lot of our young men are being used as cannon fodder today. And because if they can't be married, if children today cannot be raised in a stable home to where there is a father and a mother, then those young boys have no other father but the streets to raise them. And they're doomed to be dysfunctional. And so how do you look at marriage? How do you deem it? Well, another thing I want to talk about was marriages is this. Who told you that going to a church or going to a parsonage or flying to Cancun and having somebody to say a few words over you, you dress up in a suit, and of course all the women are dressing up in white today. I don't care if they've been turned more times than a doorknob. They all are dressed in white today. But it's crazy. It's nonsensical to think that a ceremony is what binds you in marriage. So when I hear people say, well, we're going to get married, the first thing I say to them, I said, hadn't you already had sex? Oh yeah. What do you mean you're getting married? You're already married. You both have agreed, right? You had sex. Oh, I'll say, you mean properly what you're saying is you're going to have a ceremony to make her feel good, basically. Because see, marriage in the old style of the family, it wasn't a man getting on one knee, begging a woman in front of everybody to accept her hand, or he accept his hand as far as marriage. It wasn't all this romance stuff, the way you feel good. Listen, the scriptures tell us to be kindly and affectionate one to another. Affection is a hell of a lot different than Roman romance, which I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, because that's probably the reason why that many of you are wired wrong concerning your role, male and female, because you think romance is marriage. You think romance is love. And that's far from it. Has nothing to do with it whatsoever at all. And it's going to take Pastor Dowell to bring it out and bring clarity to it, and I'm going to. But you spend thousands of dollars in order to appease some emotions and feelings because you think that you actually got married because you had somebody to sign a piece of paper when you've already done had sex. Who knows how many times that you've already done had sex. But it makes you feel like you've been so-called married because you had a ceremony, guests was invited, all this old other stuff. But I guarantee you, if you look at history and you look at this new thing they call marriage today, we are far from the truth of it, far from the truth of it. And the truth is, if you want to stop the family unit from being destroyed, we're going to have to go back to the old past. We're going to have to go back to the old landmarks. We can't continue to keep doing things the way that this world says doing because they are after destroying the family unit. That's why we have a bunch of nomads running around here. That's why we have a bunch of women making mouths and speaking arrogantly at men, dishonoring, disrespecting them, because they can use the authority of the state because of that piece of paper that you made a third-party contractual agreement with. So when you enter into marriage, most people don't want to hear this, but the truth is, when you get a marriage license from the state, you're into a polygamy unit, a polygamy unity. That's what you enter into. You have the state, you have the husband, and you have the wife. And any of the children that comes from that, from the husband and the wife, they belong to the state. You know how I know that? Go and try to take your children out of public school and see won't the state come to show up to take his children from you. I know many of you don't want to hear this, but see, because you have accepted everything that they have told you, and you think that whatever they say to you is all right and is truthful and is honest. And it ain't until you start challenging stuff, it ain't until you start testing stuff that you find out how deep the rabbit hole goes and how evil this system is. Because this system is not for the man whatsoever, shape, fashion, or form. And it really ain't for the woman, because if it was, it would tell the woman, you stick with the husband, no matter what, stick with him. Stick with the children. And I'm not saying in cases of abuses, because I don't put that in, boy, people will go off. But you know what I'm saying. That's why I said our grandmothers were a hell of a lot harder working and ethically and morally stronger than women are today. They knew how to keep the family unit together. Today, the women, the first thing they do at the sign of mental distress, they run. They run and tear it up, and then they destroy the very future, if it was a good man in there, that their children could have had. It's just so sad. But don't you think for a minute that just because you go out and pay a lot of money to do a ceremony, that makes you married. The day that you agree that you are hooked up and you're married to each other, or you're going to be married, and then you consummate, that's when you got married. And it's nonsensical for women who have been out here, have had more than 10 and 15, 20 consorts to go put on a white dress that's supposed to signify purity, right? And you go out here and the next thing you know, you're doing monkey double backflips on your so-called honeymoon, which you already done had a honeymoon. You see, what I think the deception of the daytime and hour is this. We pick and choose to believe what we want to believe, and we're comfortable in the lies that we have accepted and believed. And then anytime somebody comes meddling around to try to destroy our concept of life, or our concept of what we consider to be marriage, or what we consider to be a family, if it ain't the deception that we've always been under, then we get upset. Well, I think my camera is getting hot because of the heat, and I can understand that the sun is right on it. I'm gonna go ahead and end this video right here before my camera just shuts down. I hope I said something to stimulate thought. Maybe I'll come back a little bit later. But listen, you do have the right to contract privately with an individual, and it is also held up by the Constitution. And when you do, you need to learn how to do it to where you're outside of the jurisdiction of civil authorities. Y'all have a wonderful day. King coming.